Hello everybody and welcome to the British Pint. My name is Christoph and today we are brewing two more modern English beers that are however quite reputed, and these are the two beers from Meantime, the IPA, or it was called the London IPA previously, and the London Porter. As with other beers that I brewed before, there are podcasts about these two beers on the Brewing Network in the format Can You Brew It, where they are trying to recreate these beers, and I try to decipher with as high as accuracy as I can what exactly the brewer is saying in these podcasts, which you will find in the video description, and how I can transfer these details into my brew so that today I can recreate these beers as accurately as possible. So the thing is that there are a lot of things which were puzzling for the brewers from the Brewing Network, and they were actually not able to recreate it properly. I do not have much experience with these beers, because there's no way for me to get either of them here in Germany. However, I did get the Meantime London IPA in France recently, a few months ago during my holidays. It was just in a supermarket, just on the shelf, so I grabbed it and tried it. It was really nice, but I suspect it was a bit older because it was not that hoppy, and it was called Meantime London IPA, whereas I believe they are called now Meantime IPA. I might double check on that, exactly when the date was that they switched the name. So let's start with the Meantime London Porter. I have a bag here where I already entered all the grains. The grains in the video, the grains in the podcast were given in percentages, and so that's what I used here. I'll put the percentages in the description to give you the full recipe, whereas here I will just quickly say the grams that I'm using. So we're going for a beer that has 6.2% alcohol. It goes from 14.6 degree Plato down to 3 degrees Plato. That is the original and final gravity. We are expecting 35 IBU, which is one of the things that the people who tried to clone this in the Brewing Network didn't quite achieve. And we're going for something quite dark but not black, 76 EBC. So most of this is pale malt, and in the podcast they specified that currently they were using not just pale malt, but a Maris Otter blended malt that they got from Thomas Fawcett, which I also managed to acquire. So there's a shop in Germany that serves exactly that one, and they actually have a description there why it is a blended malt, and that is because pure Maris Otter from that year would have yielded too much nitrogen in the malt, so too much protein, too much amino acids. And so with the blending, they actually managed to get that down to a level that is typical for an English malt. Something that I recently noticed is that one of the few things that is really distinct between British pale malt or base malts and English base malts, British and German, sorry, is that the German ones have around 12% protein content and the British ones 8.5 to 10, so significantly less. And that is in part because the British brewers do not do a protein rest. So the malt is made in a way that they don't need to do that, whereas in Germany you can do a protein rest and that will dissolve more of that protein into solution. So I'm using the blended malt, Maris Otter blended malt from Thomas Fawcett, 410 grams in here. Then I added Munich malt, 245 grams, and in this case the Munich malt was specifically Munich malt type 1, so 12 EBC roughly. And they specified that their Munich malt was from Beard because it was tasting differently, but I couldn't find any details on the spec sheet, so I just used the Munich malt type 1 that I could get here, which is from the Swain. I think it's a Dutch malting company close by. So then we have brown malt, 80 grams. We have smoked malt, that is the Beechwood smoked malt from Germany, 80 grams. And I changed on that. I did use 80 grams of brown malt, the one that I have here, which is 160 EBC, but I did not have the Beechwood smoked malt. I have the oak smoked malt, the wheat malt that I used for my Grätzer type beer recently, and I have the peated malt, which is completely distinct. Both of them are different in the taste. So what I did do is that they also specify here torrefied wheat, 51 grams, so I used 50. And what I did is I actually used the smoked wheat malt that I had with 80 grams and then didn't use the torrefied wheat at all and just scaled everything slightly up to get the same amount of grist. Yeah, and then we have pale crystal malt. They specify Thomas Fawcett 40 EBC. In my case, I just used the Cara Red from Germany because I just had that here. I think that is 40 to 60 EBC, so it should be quite fitting. 50 grams. And then we have chocolate malt, 20 grams. They specify their chocolate malt with a color of 1000 EBC. I recently realized that when I equaled chocolate malt and the Carafa 2 from Germany in one of my fundamental videos, like the tutorial videos, where I equate different malts, that's not quite accurate. The Carafa 2, which I have here, has 1150 EBC average, and chocolate malt tends to be more around 900, in this case 1000. So I did actually buy chocolate malt, but I can't find it. Somewhere in this house there is a small bag with 100 grams of best malt chocolate malt, and I cannot find it. I don't know why. I searched for a few weeks now. But nevertheless, I went back through the Carafa and I will chuck that in the bag now. And then the mixture is almost complete. But I left this one out of the bag until I could find the malt, which unfortunately I didn't. So that was 20 grams, and then the last ingredient is black malt, 10 grams, and they specify actually one with the color of only 1100 to 1200 EBC. That doesn't make much sense to me. Maybe they have a very pale black malt, but I couldn't find any manufacturer in the UK who would provide that. So I used the normal black malt that I get here, which is 1300 to 1400 EBC, I think. And yeah, just to get really that dark black malty character. Yeah, it could be that in total my beer will be slightly darker because of that. But color for me is something that is not really important in a beer. The first and foremost aspect is the taste and the flavor. And then you also wish to get quite close in color, but as long as it's dark brown, it's fine. Okay, so that's the malt bill. As I said, I will give you the percentages in the description, because then you can get more accurate results for your specific what is it called? Your specific batch size, exactly. Yeah. The hopping is pure Fuggles in that case. I do have some cones left of Fuggles and East Kent Golding. I will use most of them for the Meantime London IPA. And I bought pallets recently because I didn't find any German shop anymore that is selling cones. I think there are some in the EU, for example in Ireland or Slovenia, so I might buy some from those in the future. But sometimes they have only Fuggles, sometimes only East Kent Golding, so it's not really convenient to go shopping like that just for one type of hop. Yeah, so I'll see how I continue with that. I never compared cones with pellets, but just from the fact that the cones contain the seeds and the pellets don't, there should be some difference in there. Yeah, Fuggles. Okay, so 75 minutes of boil. We add 4 grams for each of the 3 stages. At the beginning of the boil, 4 grams, the last 10 minutes 4 grams, and post-boil 4 grams. Now, they do specify that they get a very large percentage of their bitterness from the very late hoppings. In this case, I think they mean the post-boil in particular. Actually, they mention that specifically for the London IPA version, because there they say that they also get a lot from the dry hop. But I think this is somewhat misleading, because Fuller's state that they get a lot of bitterness from their dry hop because they do the dry hop for 2 weeks. These guys don't. So I think most of the bitterness comes from the late hopping in the boil or post-boil, and that is because they just take a very long time to cool down and they add at 100 degrees, so at flame out. For the London IPA they use a hop bag. For this one they do not. Or they don't specify it, I think. So I got a question mark here, no hop bag question mark. I think they don't use a hop bag. So nevertheless, what I will do is I will let it cool down very slowly to get the high amount of IBU that I need. 35 IBU is something I will never get with just 4 grams of Fuggles at the beginning of the boil. They specify that they have an average of 5% alpha acid for all the hops together, which is Fuggle and East Kent Golding in the first of the 2 podcasts for the IPA. So I have somewhat around there. I think it's 4.5 for the Fuggles and 4 for East Kent Golding or vice versa. But it changes. My pellets have a different alpha acid than the cones and so on, and some of them are older than the others. So I will just stick to the same grams, but I might get very slightly different alpha acid. But if you combine East Kent Golding and Fuggles, you should get an alpha acid average of 5% if you want to be correct or accurate. And then for the Fuggles alone, they don't specify that really. Yeah, just somewhere between 4 and 5% would be standard. And that would be that beer. It's fermented with the Nottingham yeast at 22 degrees. So this is definitely not used in a way that is very neutral. 22 degrees is quite warm. I didn't have any problems with 22 degrees except for the malt extract beer, which has a different yeast, but it's somewhat related, I believe. And There, the problem was probably that I had a very big fermenter, and the big fermenters create more heat than the smaller ones. In this case, I'm making my usual 4.5 liters of beer, so I should have no problem with any heat or something. Oh yeah, the water. I should mention something about the water. They're mixing Thames water that is carbon filtered with their tap water, but they don't specify anything what they do, except that for the London Porter they add calcium chloride until it reaches 75 ppm. Now I did manage to buy calcium chloride as a powder from the German shop Braumischung, and that is actually really convenient because then it's easier to calculate what it does. It actually says in here, if you put 1 gram on 10 liters, you get 27 milligrams of calcium. So I use 7 liters of water always. I still didn't get to going to a procedure where I want to really sparge until a certain residual gravity is reached in the sparge water. So I still use the fixed amount, and then I will just, after the boil, adjust so that the original gravity is correct, and then I might get changing levels of water in the final fermenter, but that's not something that is really an issue for me. If you have a perfect system set up where you know exactly what you do, you shouldn't use the same amount of sparge water or mash water as I use. I also need quite a lot of mash water. I usually use 4 liters and then 3 liters of sparge water, because I do not have any sparge plate in there that filters that. I just use the tap. That has some effect, and then as if the mash settles properly, everything is fine. With these beers, because they are high in gravity compared to the 12% of 12 degrees Plato that I usually use, I will probably use some rice hulls. So finally I got some rice hulls here. That's 1 kilo, quite a lot. It's quite fluffy, and I will probably use a handful of that. Maybe 50 grams, probably less. So yeah, I'm going to add 1 gram of calcium chloride to the 7 liters of water. I will heat that up slightly because I think it dissolves better in warm water. And then I should reach somewhere around 75 ppm calcium, probably a bit higher, maybe 80. And my chloride should be increased from 50 to roughly 100. That's the only thing I will do. I still have quite a lot of sulfate in my water, but since they don't specify anything, I will have a 1-to-1 ratio of sulfite to chloride afterwards, which is different from my usual tap water, so it will probably do something for the maltiness. Okay, so we're done with that beer. The next one is the Meantime London IPA. So again, the malts come in percentages. Again, the main base malt is the Thomas Fawcett Maris Otter blended malt. So I have the malt mixed here, the grist. 975 grams of pale malt, and then I have from the same Munich Type 1 malt 104 grams. And then Cara Red I used again. In this case they actually say that it's a pale crystal malt that's 50 EBC, so I don't know if they use different ones for the 2 beers instead of the 41 they specified in the other video, no, not video, podcast, sorry. And so I just use 10 grams in here, and then they use sugar. So they specify that they're using a standard invert, very similar to Lyle's golden syrup, and they're using 6%. So in my case that would be 70 gram. I did use the formula, so the problem with sugar, if it's a pure sugar, you will use 100% of that. So your brewhouse efficiency for sugar is higher than the brewhouse efficiency for malt. And of course it gets worse when you think about the brewery having a different efficiency for the malt than you. So actually the percentage of sugar, if you say 6%, doesn't scale the same way. So what I did is to get to a certain final gravity to estimate what the total amount of fermentables is that I need, is I calculated the average brewhouse efficiency. So I have a certain 94% with 65% brewhouse efficiency. That's what I get for my, for some of the beers that I calculated, to be honest. And then 6% of sugar, which has 100% accuracy. Let me just get the... Yep, this is the pale one. This is invert sugar number 1. So I will just use 6% of this one, which is 70 grams, but it will still be, it will get me to the correct gravity, but the percentages will be different for me than for the brewery, because I will probably get less fermentables from the malt than they do, so my mixture will be slightly different. This is actually really annoying, because it would be much easier if the breweries would just give you grams per hectoliter or anything like that, so that you would actually get the exact amount of sugar. And also, if they have Lyle's Golden Syrup, which contains 80% sugar, then of course your brewhouse efficiency for that sugar would be 80% and not 100%, so it gets even worse. I'm using pure sugar. This is not a syrup. It doesn't run at all. I think it runs very, very slowly. So 70 grams of that. I'll add that at the last 10 minutes of the boil. I think that's the standard way to do it. Hops. So again, in the description I will put down the grams per hectoliter, which gives you more accuracy. In my case, I calculated it down to the 4.5 liters that I'm using. And for that, it is always 50-50 Foggels and East Kent Golding. And we actually put 4 grams of each in the first wort. So they actually start extracting bitterness while the 78-degree mashed out stuff is going there. Oh, I didn't specify the mash procedure. I was specifying a second for both. Sorry. It's just so much data on these sheets because in the podcast they go through all these steps. Very difficult to get everything correct. So 4 grams each at the beginning, well, not at the beginning of the boil, before the boil. Then 75 minutes of boil. Then in the last 5 minutes we add 6 grams of each in the last after the boil and post boil, where they use a hop bag, so they actually pour the boiling liquid on top of the fresh hops there. I use cone for the last 2 stages, for the post boil and the dry hop. Post boil 4 grams each, dry hop 5 grams each. And they specify that they do the dry hop at 7 degrees. So I will try to get my fermenting beer down to 7 degrees and then do the dry hop for the last 3 days, which I don't think they specify, but that's what I'm going to do. Do a dry hop for 3 days in cold temperature. If I set my fridge to the lowest power level, then I think it has 7.5 degrees, so I'm going to try that. If I can't, I'll try to put it outside. It's going to become colder in the next few days, roughly 4 to 5 degrees ambient temperature, so I have to see how I get close to 7 degrees. Maybe in the fridge will be the most accurate, because I know it's consistently 7.5 degrees on the lowest level. Then again, Nottingham yeast to 22 degrees. For that beer, sorry, I didn't mention that in the beginning, 16.8 degree Plato original gravity falls down to 3 degree Plato, that's over 80% apparent attenuation. 7.45% alcohol, 75 IBU, and you only get those 75 IBU again if you really let this cool down slowly after adding the post-boil hop. And then 9 to 10 EBC, so that's just quite a pale beer. They treat the water so that they get 70 ppm of calcium, but they do for that beer with calcium sulfate. So in both cases they treat the water, but one with calcium sulfate, the other one with calcium chloride. So mash procedures. The London IPA, they do 30 minutes at 62 degrees and then a very slow heat up over 30 minutes to 70 degrees, something which I cannot do with my setup here. So what I'm going to do, because this looks like a procedure that gives you a lot of fermentable sugars, quite dry, is I'm going to do 40 minutes at 62 degrees and then heat up to 70 or 72, wait for saccharification and then mash out. I don't think they do a mash out. I think they immediately do the runoff at 70 degrees, which is okay if you have the temperature quite stable. I can't be sure that my temperature will be really stable at 70. If it drops too low, then things will start to become too much fermentable. And I won't get enough dextrine, so I don't want to do that. I will actually do a mash off. And for the London Porter, which I forgot previously, they do another mash of 30 minutes at 62 degrees, but then they rise to 72 degrees within 20 minutes, so a bit quicker. So I'm going to do 30 minutes and then 72 degrees until saccharification, and then mash off again, so that this will be a bit more malty, a bit more dextrine in there. You will also see that that beer had a slightly lower apparent attenuation. I think it was 79%, something like that, so slightly lower. Okay, these are the details of all the beers. Again, if that was too confusing or difficult to grasp, look in the video description. I will try to put everything there as accurately as possible. Maybe put the water treatment at the top or something like that, so it doesn't stand in the side, and then the mash before the hops. Okay. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I will start with the lower gravity beer, the London Porter. Check if that runs out properly with the amount of rice spelt that I do there, because I'm definitely going to use more for the London IPA, and I might increase that over proportionally just to be on the safe side. Yeah, if worst case, I will have to put everything in my sieve again that I use for very much fighting mashes that like to set with the buckwheat, with the oat malt, with 100% wheat malt, all that stuff. And then I get significantly lower gravity, but that will be fine. I will just boil it down and then get less beer in the end. Okay, so that would be about it. I might want to add that for the London Porter, they add the roasted malt from the beginning. There's no late addition. You want to get roasted flavor, not just color. It's something that the Germans love to do, just getting color, which I find really peculiar because you could just add caramel for coloring. No matter. So let's start with the London Porter, see how the mash works, see if it gets sparred. Then I will continue with the next one, and then I should get everything done within a day without problems, because I have done 2 beers in 1 day previously. If both of them get a set mash, I will have problems. So I might do this one in the next day if everything goes horribly wrong. Otherwise, I'll see you back when I pitch these, just to tell you a bit about how everything worked. See you then. Alrighty guys, we're back. I have both beers ready, and you can easily distinguish which one is which because of the color, which is very nice. Less confusion for me. And it's a bit interesting with the gravities, but first let's talk about the mash and the sparging. Everything worked really well. I love the rice hulls, they helped me out a lot. I used a small amount on this of rice hulls for this one, large amount for this one, and the sparging was just this gentle trickle. It constantly ran out, just lovely, perfect. So that was really easy. Then boiling, as I said, I started with this one. Everything was fine until I forgot to actually put in the post-boil hops, because I was so concentrated on putting this one on the side, letting it cool on its own to give it that long post-isomerization time. And yeah, so what I had to do was do a small hop tea with the hops that I had forgotten, pour boiling water over them, just let them stand for some time so that they get also this high hop utilization, and then I could enter it, and then this one is pretty much ready. Now that will probably not alter the flavor, so that should be fine. While I was filming that hop tea I made, this one was already boiling over, so that was really annoying. I wasn't paying enough attention. Just small details, but it's a bit annoying. Another thing that I forgot is I started with this one and I had the 40 minutes of 62 degrees in my mind, but of course that was the mash program for this one. So both of them have now 40 minutes off at 62 degrees, and then afterwards the saccharification, which is okay, but this one will be slightly drier than intended. Okay, so the only thing that is actually different from what I wanted to get in the end, the final result, is that this one is at 13.2 degree Brix now, and I really cannot explain it at all. The filling level is just right. I had the proper amount of liquor in the pot, I had the proper amount of evaporation, everything seemed fine, so I might have miscalculated the amount of grist I need. It's a bit strange, I have no idea. So 13.2 degree Brix, I wanted to have 14.6 degree plateau, so 15 degree Brix roughly. That's actually significantly less. While this one, when at the same filling level as this one, had, what was it, 18.2 degree Brix, so this one was higher than I needed it to be, and this is really bizarre because I don't understand why the efficiency is varying so much here. That's really strange. I'm going to recalculate the amounts, but yeah, if you work from the percentages, you should not have the same problem. So I diluted this one a bit. You see that the fill level is slightly higher, and now it's at 17 degree Brix, and I need 16.8 degree plateau, which is well within my margin of error, so that's fine. And now we can add the yeast. So I have some rehydrated Nottingham yeast. What I didn't say previously is that the brewery very likely will use liquid yeast. And they're probably going to use the White Labs Nottingham Ale, which is a liquid version of this one, and which provides more esters. So they're doing a warm fermentation, they want to have some fruity esters, they want to have a British flavor in their beer and not this ultra neutral that you get when you use dry Nottingham at 16 degrees, for example. That really tastes like just Kolsch yeast, or for me it's actually bottom fermented yeast. But of course, if you have proper bottom fermented procedure, it will be even less estery. Yeah, so if you want to be perfect, get liquid yeast. I'm pretty sure that this will give a more fruity, more wholesome flavor, and that's really what you want to have with a proper British ale. Now, the amount of hops was really insane, and even for the London Porter, where I used only pellet hops, I had so much hops in there, and I never used post-boil hopping in a porter before. I think it's quite anachronistic, and it's funny because when they describe the malt bill, they actually talk about how they wanted to get something that's historically accurate, and then they put post-boil hops in, which is a bit surprising. From what I know, that was not done 100 to 200 years ago. And then this one, oh god, so much hops. I actually did have enough hops to do everything with whole hops, cone hops, and my Fuggles is spent now, but I still have quite a lot of Eastern Golding left, so that's fine. That's really nice. I can continue making my proper English ales with the whole hops that still have seeds in them, at least for some time. And you lose a lot of wort in this one, which is it's more surprising that I got just the gravity I needed. But you lose wort when you have whole hops because they soak up everything. I did squeeze them out a bit, you know, with a spoon in my tea sieve and everything. So I got a bit of it back, but losses with this one will be significantly higher with this one, which again doesn't make sense mathematically with respect to what I received, you know. Okay. Nonetheless, we are done here and we can let it ferment now. I can't quite remember what the maturation time for these two was, so I'll look that up and do it appropriately if they say anything. Otherwise, I will probably do this one. Well, I would say shorter, but it is so high in alcohol, 7.45%. I'm pretty sure I shouldn't. So I'm probably going to let these rest, I think 6 weeks, warm conditioning. And for a proper porter, you would probably go for 8 or more. But I think I want to try them back to back. So 6 weeks, both of them, and then see how the flavor is. And then maybe in the future, I can give a comment how they will develop as a comment on the tasting video. Okay, so that will be it. And what was the time? How long did it take now? That is 10 hours, yeah. The cooling was particularly slow, so it all took a lot of time. 10 hours of processing time for 2 beers. It's still okay, but I can only do that because I am in holidays still. It's the 2nd January now, so just after New Year. Right, then see you for the next video, which will be the tasting video, and I'm so looking forward to this. And until then, have a good time and take care. Bye-bye.